CEO bet she could fire him in 3 days. The single dad's smile stopped her cold. She made the bet on a Monday morning, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. 3 days, Natalie Voss said, setting her coffee on the conference table like a gavel. I'll have him out by Wednesday. Her deputy, Brad Colton, laughed. Everyone else in the room smiled, the careful smile of people who know better but won't say so. The man they were discussing was standing 40 feet away, in the copy room, refilling the paper tray. His name was Joel Martin. He was 37, a new transfer from the company's regional office in Columbus, and he'd arrived at Voss Strategic Group on a Thursday with a box of personal items, a worn laptop bag, and a daughter's crayon drawing taped to the inside of the box lid. He wore the same 2 blazers on rotation. He took the 6:10 a.m. train. He ate lunch at his desk. He left without exception, without apology, at 4:45 every single day. That was the thing Natalie Voss could not stand. She had built this firm on a particular culture: early arrivals, late departures, the quiet competition of visible effort. She measured commitment in hours logged, calls taken after dinner, the unspoken agreement that the job was always the first thing. She'd made VP at 31. She'd sacrificed 2 relationships and 1 vacation to do it. She believed completely that people who left at 4:45 were people who didn't want it badly enough. She did not know, had not thought to look, that Joel Martin left at 4:45 because his son's bus arrived at 5:05 and there was no one else to meet it. She did not know that Joel Martin had buried his wife 14 months ago. She did not know that the laptop bag contained, in the front pocket, a purple post-it note that said, "Be home soon. Love, Dad," which he stuck to the inside of his locker every morning and took back at the end of every day. She did not know any of this. What she knew was that he left at 4:45, and that was enough. 3 days, Brad said, grinning. What do you get if you win? I always win, Natalie said. What she didn't know yet was that by Friday, not Wednesday, not Thursday, but Friday, 5 days after the bet was made, she would be sitting in her own conference room, completely still, reading a file that would undo every assumption she'd built the last 10 years on. And the man she'd intended to fire would be the reason she kept her job at all. 16 hours earlier, Joel Martin had woken up at 5 a.m. to the sound of his son burning toast. It happened every Tuesday. Owen, who was 8 and deeply committed to his own independence, had decided 6 months ago that he was old enough to make his own breakfast. Joel had said fine. He'd moved the toaster to the low counter, put the bread in the drawer Owen could reach, and accepted that Tuesday mornings would smell like carbon for the foreseeable future. He lay in bed for 2 minutes, listening to the smoke alarm, which Owen had also learned to silence himself, climbing on the step stool, waving a dish towel, and then got up. Owen was standing at the counter eating black-edged toast with peanut butter and looking completely satisfied. You burned it again, Joel said. I like it crispy. That's not crispy, that's carbonized. What's carbonized? It means you burned it. Owen looked at the toast. I like it this way. Joel put the coffee on and didn't argue. He'd learned, in the 14 months since Claire died, that some hills were worth dying on and some were not. Burned toast on Tuesday was not. Owen making his own breakfast, standing at a counter, feeding himself, that was something. That was him trying, which was more than Joel had managed for the first several months. So he kept his opinions about the toast to himself. He made Owen's lunch while Owen ate. Turkey on wheat, apple slices, the little note. He'd written them every day since the first week of school, nothing elaborate, just one line. You're going to do great today, Dad. Or, save some fun for after school, Dad. Or sometimes just, I'm proud of you. Always. He tucked the note in next to the apple. Owen watched him from the counter. Dad, are you nervous about the new job? Joel looked up. What makes you ask that? You've been making my lunch really fast. He looked down at the lunchbox. He had, in fact, been moving quickly without realizing it. A little, he said. It's a big office. Bigger than Columbus? Much bigger. Owen chewed his toast. Are the people nice? Joel considered this carefully. He thought about Natalie Voss, about the way she'd looked at him in the onboarding meeting, not unfriendly exactly. More the way you look at something that doesn't quite fit the space you've arranged. He thought about Brad Colton, who'd offered to show him around and spent the first 10 minutes of the tour pointing out which conference rooms were for real meetings and which were basically for interns. Some of them, he said. What about the not nice ones? I'm working on figuring them out. Owen nodded, satisfied, and finished his toast. Joel zipped the lunchbox, poured his coffee into a travel mug, and helped Owen find his left shoe, which had migrated under the couch in a way that defied all reasonable explanation. At 5:52, Owen was buckled into the back seat, lunch in his lap, looking out the window. Dad? Yeah. I'm going to be okay today. Joel glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Owen had started saying this about 3 months ago, not to reassure Joel, exactly, but like he was reminding himself. Like the words were a kind of armor he put on with his jacket. I know you are, Joel said. Me too. He dropped Owen at school and drove toward the city, the Post-it note already in his pocket. He was at his desk by 7:20. This was the thing nobody at Voss Strategic Group had figured out yet. Joel Marden did not leave early. He arrived early. While the floor was still quiet and the lights were on their morning dim setting, he was already 2 hours into his day, reviewing the account files he'd inherited from the previous Columbus liaison, running the numbers on the Hartwell portfolio, cross-referencing the client communication logs that nobody had touched in 4 months. He wasn't doing it to impress anyone. He did it because it needed doing, and the hours before 9 a.m. were the only ones that belonged entirely to him. At 8:47, Brad Colton arrived, looked surprised to see Joel at his desk, and said nothing. At 9:03, Natalie Voss's assistant, a quiet woman named Rosa, stopped at Joel's desk with a stack of files. Ms. Voss wants these reviewed by end of week. Hartwell account. Joel looked at the files. He'd already reviewed half of them. These the current versions. Rosa glanced at the top label. Should be. There's a discrepancy in the Q3 projections. I flagged it this morning. Someone should check the source data before she presents to the board. Rosa blinked. She's presenting Thursday. I know. That's why I flagged it this morning. Rosa took the files back, added a sticky note, and walked toward Natalie's office with slightly more urgency than she'd arrived with. Joel turned back to his screen. He did not know about the bet. Nobody told him, not out of kindness exactly, but because it was the kind of information that circulated sideways through lunch tables and elevator rides. And Joel had eaten lunch at his desk every day and taken the stairs. He heard things, though. You always hear things. On Tuesday afternoon, he went to the break room for coffee and found 2 analysts from the 3rd floor mid-conversation, which stopped with the specific abruptness of people who've just said something they shouldn't have. He poured his coffee, said nothing, went back to his desk. He thought about Claire for a moment, the way you think about someone when the world reminds you that people can be small. She used to say, "Don't let other people's opinions of you become your opinion of you." She'd cross-stitched it on a little hoop that was still hanging in the hallway of their apartment. He walked past it every morning. He turned back to the Hartwell files. The discrepancy he'd found was significant. Not career-ending significant, not fraud significant, but the kind of quiet compounding error that starts as a rounding difference and becomes a 7-figure misstatement if nobody catches it before the board sees it. Someone had made an assumption in the projection model 3 quarters ago, and nobody had questioned it since. He spent Tuesday afternoon building the corrected version. Natalie Voss called him into her office Wednesday morning. He'd known this was coming. The chair across from her desk was one of those low chairs, deliberately low, he suspected, so that whoever sat in it was always looking slightly up. He sat in it. He didn't adjust his posture. She was standing at the window. She didn't turn around immediately. It was a power move so textbook, it was almost comforting in its predictability. "You flagged an issue with the Hartwell projections," she said. "Yes." She turned. She was one of those people who managed to look both polished and exhausted at all times, like someone maintaining a very high standard through sheer force of will. Dark blazer, hair back, eyes that assessed and filed information quickly. "Walk me through it," she said. So he did. 11 minutes. No notes, he had it memorized. He walked her through the original assumption, where it had propagated through the model, what the corrected figure looked like, and what it meant for the board presentation Thursday. When he finished, she was quiet. "Why didn't you send this to analysis?" she said. "They handle the Hartwell account." "I sent it to Rosa Tuesday morning. I assumed she'd route it." Natalie looked at her computer. Something shifted in her expression, just slightly, just briefly. "She did," she said. "Analysis told me it was within acceptable variance." "It's not," Joel said. "Not at the volume Hartwell is projecting for Q1. Another silence. "You're confident in your numbers?" "Yes." She looked at him. He looked back. He had the calm of someone who'd already decided not to need her approval, which was, he knew from experience, the most disorienting thing you could present to a person who was used to granting it. "I'll have my team rerun it," she said. "That's the right call." She blinked. People didn't tell her things were the right call. They agreed with her, or they didn't. And either way, they said it carefully. "You can go," she said. He went. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known. Sitting at his desk, eating the turkey sandwich he'd packed himself, reviewing the next file in the stack, was that Natalie Voss's team had rerun the Hartwell numbers. And Joel was right. Not approximately right, exactly right. The error was exactly where he said it was. Exactly the size he'd calculated, and if it had gone to the board Thursday unremedied, the presentation would have been built on a projection figure that overstated Q1 returns by $4.3 million. Brad Colton found out at 2 p.m. He sat with it for a while. At 3:15, he went into Natalie's office and closed the door. Joel, walking past with a fresh cup of coffee, noticed the closed door and kept walking. The bet, as it turned out, was not going well. This was Wednesday, the day Natalie had promised, and Joel Marden was still at his desk. More than still at his desk. He'd corrected an error that would have embarrassed her in front of the board. He'd done it before anyone asked him to. And he'd presented it with a calm so complete it had briefly unnerved her. She needed something. She found it at 4:30. She walked to his desk herself, not sending Rosa, not emailing, but walking, which made several nearby heads turn without being obvious about it. She stood at the edge of his workspace. "I need the full Hartwell revision in the presentation deck by tomorrow morning," she said. Formatted for the board. 65-point font on the key figures, color-coded by variance level. She watched his expression. Most people, when handed an impossible deadline at 4:30, either panicked or argued. Either one gave her something to work with. Joel looked at the clock. He looked at his screen. He looked at her. "I leave at 4:45, he said. "I know when you leave." "My son's bus comes at 5:05. She held his gaze. "This is a board presentation, tomorrow." "I know what it is," he said. Not angry, not apologetic, just even. "I'll be here at 6 a.m. It'll be done before you arrive." She opened her mouth. "Ms. Voss." He said it quietly, clearly, without a tremor. "I will do the work. I will always do the work. But I will be home when my son gets off that bus. Those two things don't cancel each other out." The floor had gone very quiet, in the specific way floors go quiet when people are pretending not to listen. Natalie Voss said nothing. Joel logged off his computer, picked up his bag, took the post-it note from the inside of his locker, and left. She stood there for a moment. Brad was watching from the far end of the floor. She walked back to her office and closed the door. He was at his desk at 6:03 the next morning. The building was almost empty. The cleaning crew was finishing the far corridor. The lights were still on their lowest setting, that pre-dawn gray that makes offices feel like they belong to a different world. Joel opened the Hartwell files. He worked the way he'd always worked when it mattered, not frantically, but with the focused economy of someone who knows exactly what needs doing and does it without ceremony. He rebuilt the projection slide, reformatted the variance tables, color-coded the key figures, added a 2-slide executive summary that translated the technical correction into plain language a board member who hadn't read the underlying data could understand in 30 seconds. At 7:48, he sent the revised deck to Rosa. At 7:49, he got up, refilled his coffee, and opened the next file in his stack. At 8:55, Rosa appeared at his desk. Her expression was different than it had been all week, less neutral, more something else. "She wants to see you," Rosa said. Now. Natalie Voss's office had a wall of windows facing east. This time she was sitting behind her desk, not standing at the window. The presentation deck was open on her screen. She looked at him for a moment before she said anything. "You rebuilt the executive summary," she said. "The original was too technical for a board audience. They needed the correction translated, not just corrected. Analysis has been preparing board materials for 2 years." "I know." "They didn't translate it." "I know," he said again. She turned to the screen. He watched her read something, he couldn't see what, and then turned back. "Where did you work before Columbus?" she said. He'd been expecting this. Not the question exactly, but the moment of it. The moment when a person who hasn't been paying attention starts to pay attention. "Before Columbus, I was at Meridian Group, head of client strategy." She was still. Meridian Group, in Chicago. Yes. Meridian Group was not a small firm. Anyone in this industry knew Meridian Group. "Why did you leave?" she said. "My wife got sick." He said it plainly, without armor and without drama. The way you say a thing after you've said it enough times that the saying of it no longer undoes you. "I needed to be home. Columbus was closer to her family. When she passed, I stayed. Then the regional office restructured, and the transfer here made sense. My son's in a good school. We're finding our footing." The room was quiet. Natalie Voss was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen from her yet. Not assessing, not strategic. Something more uncomfortable than that. "I didn't know," she said. "You didn't ask," he said. Not accusatory, just accurate. She looked away from him for a moment. Out the window. 14 floors of Morning City Light. The board presentation is in 2 hours, she said. I want you in the room. He blinked once. That's a senior staff meeting. Yes. You want me in it. You corrected the numbers. You should be there when they're presented. He thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Okay. One more thing. She clicked something on her screen and turned it toward him. His personnel file. She'd pulled it properly this time, not just the transfer summary, the full file from Meridian, including the client roster. I should have read this Monday. He looked at the screen. Probably. I made an assumption. You did. I'm saying I was wrong. He looked at her steadily. I know. She held his gaze. This was not a woman who said those words easily. He could see the weight of it, not performed, not strategic. Actual. Is there anything you need? She said. For the presentation. A chair that isn't lower than everyone else's, he said. For one beat, something crossed her face that wasn't quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. Done, she said. The board presentation ran 45 minutes. Joel sat 3 seats from the head of the table. He said very little. When the board's lead financial director, a careful gray-haired man named Thomas Abernethy, stopped at slide 7 and said, "Walk me through the variance recalculation." Natalie nodded toward Joel. He walked Thomas Abernethy through it, clearly, specifically, without hedging. Thomas Abernethy looked at Natalie when Joel finished. "Who is this?" he said. "Joel Marden," Natalie said. "Client strategy." He identified the error. Thomas Abernethy looked at Joel for a long moment. "You've been here a week." 4 days, Joel said. The room was quiet, in the way boardrooms get quiet when something unexpected has happened and everyone is recalibrating. "Good catch," Thomas Abernethy said. Joel nodded once. After the meeting, Brad Colton found him at the coffee station. Brad was the kind of person who registered which way the wind was blowing before he registered anything else, and the wind had shifted considerably in the last 2 hours. "Good work in there," Brad said, with the ease of someone who had never made a bet, and certainly not the specific bet he had in fact made on Monday morning. Joel poured his coffee. "Thanks." "Natalie's tough, but she's fair," Brad said. "Once she knows what she's dealing with." Joel looked at him. "Sure. If you want, I can introduce you to some of the senior team. Show you how things actually run around here." Joel picked up his mug. "I think I've got a reasonable idea." He walked back to his desk. By Friday morning, 3 things had happened that nobody had predicted at the start of the week. The first, Thomas Abernethy had requested Joel Marden be assigned as the primary client contact on the Hartwell account going forward. He'd sent the request to Natalie in writing. CC'd the board chair. The second, Brad Colton had been asked to explain, in a memo to HR, why the Hartwell analysis team had signed off on the erroneous projections for 3 consecutive quarters without flagging the compounding variance. The memo was due by close of business Friday. The third, Natalie Voss, who had not apologized professionally to anyone in this building in 11 years, had asked Rosa to book 30 minutes with Joel Marden's calendar. Joel was at his desk at 6:15 when Rosa's calendar invite came through. He looked at it. 9 a.m. Check-in, NV. He accepted it. He opened the next file. The meeting lasted 22 minutes. She gave him the Hartwell account formally. She offered him the title adjustment that came with it, which was 2 levels above where he'd been placed when he transferred. She said it had been an administrative error, the level he'd been brought in at. She said it with a steadiness that suggested she knew it hadn't entirely been an error. and that she was choosing to call it one because it was the only version of the story that moved them forward. He respected that. "I want to ask you something," she said near the end. "Okay." "The 445 thing?" She said it without preamble. "Does it ever bother you that people read it the way they do?" He thought about this honestly. "Sometimes," he said. "Then I get home, and Owen's at the door. And I remember that other people's assumptions about my commitment are their problem, not mine." She was quiet. "How old?" she said. 8. She looked at something on her desk. He didn't know what. "I have a daughter," she said. 11. She's with her dad this week." He didn't know that. Nobody in this office probably knew that. Not really. "Is she okay?" he said. Natalie looked up, surprised by the question, not used to it. "She's good," she said. "She's..." A pause. "She's better than I give myself time to notice." The room held that for a moment. Joel stood. "I'll have the Hartwell transition summary on your desk by Tuesday." "Monday's fine." "I'll be here at 6, he said. "Tuesday's fine." The corner of her mouth moved. "Tuesday," she said. Brad Colton submitted his HR memo at 4:58 to Friday afternoon. It was the longest document he had produced in 2 years at Voss Strategic Group, and it did not reflect well on him. His explanation for the missed variance, that the projections had been within the team's standard review parameters, satisfied no one. The board chair replied by end of day with a single sentence requesting a process audit of all active client accounts. Brad did not enjoy his weekend. Natalie Voss, who had a habit of working Saturday mornings, went to her daughter's soccer game instead. She sat in a folding chair on the sideline. She didn't check her phone. Her daughter, dark-haired, fast, deeply serious about the corner kick, scored once in the second half and looked up immediately into the crowd. Looking for her. Natalie waved. Her daughter grinned, then turned back to the game. Natalie sat with that for a long time. 3 weeks later, Joel Marden was walking down the 14th floor hallway when he heard Rosa's voice from the break room. "He got here before the lights came on," Rosa was saying, to someone Joel couldn't see. 7 days in a row. How does he even function on that little sleep? He has a kid. You just function. Joel kept walking. He was carrying 2 coffee cups, one for himself, one for Thomas Abernethy's assistant, who had mentioned in passing that the 3rd floor machine was broken, and who had looked surprised the first time he'd brought it, and less surprised each time since. At 4:45, he shut down his computer. At the coat rack, he opened his locker, took out the Post-it note. "Rate it once. Be home soon. Love, Dad," and tucked it in his jacket pocket. Rosa was at the front desk. She looked up. "Night, Rosa." "Night, Joel. Tell Owen I say hi." He stopped, turned back. "You know his name?" She smiled. "You talk about him every day. You don't realize you do it." He stood there for a moment. Then he nodded. "I'll tell him." He took the elevator down, walked to the train, found a window seat. Outside, the city moved past in the particular way it moves when you're going somewhere you want to be. Faster than it looks, lighter than it feels. Owen's bus arrived at 5:05. Joel was on the front step at 5:03. Owen came down the bus stairs with his backpack listing sideways and a drawing in his hand, something in green and blue that might have been a dinosaur or might have been a map. It was genuinely hard to tell. "Dad." He thrust the drawing forward. "We learned about ecosystems. This is a food chain." Joel took the drawing, studied it with appropriate gravity. "Which one is the apex predator?" Owen pointed to a green shape in the top corner. "That's a frog," Joel said. "That's a large frog," Owen said. He runs the whole thing. Joel looked at the drawing for another moment. Then he put his arm around Owen's shoulders, and they went inside. The pot on the stove was already warm. The table had 2 plates. The drawing went on the refrigerator, right next to the other ones. The stacked layers of Owen's mind made visible in marker and crayon, covering almost the entire door. Joel looked at the refrigerator. Thought about the week, the numbers, the boardroom, the low chair he'd sat in without adjusting his posture. Thought about Thomas Abernethy saying good catch to a man who'd been in the building 4 days. Thought about Natalie Voss at her daughter's soccer game, not checking her phone. Thought about Owen on the bus steps, holding a food chain where a frog was the apex predator, completely confident in his own version of things. He set 2 glasses of water on the table. "Dinner," he said. Owen climbed into his chair. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Were the people nice today?" Joel sat down, picked up his fork. "Getting there," he said. Owen nodded seriously, like this was exactly the right answer. Like getting there was not a failure, but a direction. Which Joel thought was exactly what it was.